Brittney Griner apologized to Caitlin Clark and retired from the WNBA on the same day? No, seriously. That's how it went down. After a decade of dominance, a near-death experience in Russia, and a career that once defined the modern WNBA, Brittney Griner left the game not with a final dunk or a farewell speech, but with a post-game apology and a vanishing act so fast it left scorch marks on the court. And a reason? Oh, just a little thing called a full-blown meltdown on national television.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
If you blinked, you might have missed it. One heated game, one too many elbows, and then suddenly, bam, Griner is shoving Caitlin Clark and hurling racial slurs like she forgot every mic in the arena was live. The clip exploded online. You couldn't scroll 2 inches without seeing the frame-by-frame breakdown. SportsCenter dissected it. Reddit buried her. And TikTok? Let's just say the stitches were savage. The league? Mortified. The WNBA's trying to go mainstream, clean up its image, and appeal to new fans. And now here's one of its most recognizable veterans turning a rising star's jersey into target practice. You could feel the shift. Clark, the fresh face of the league, became even more untouchable. And Griner? She became a cautionary tale overnight. What's wild is how quickly the apology came, and how little it helped. The tone? Hollow. The timing? Suspicious. And the sudden retirement announcement that followed? It didn't scream closure. It screamed damage control. Like someone realized the PR hole was too deep to climb out of and said, you know what? Let's just unplug the mic and walk off stage. And that's exactly what Griner did. No interviews. No real explanation. Just a cold, calculated end to a career that, let's be real, was already on life support. Her minutes were shrinking, her impact was fading, and the league's spotlight had already swung toward Clark and her cohort of Gen Z phenoms. Griner wasn't just losing games, she was losing relevance. But let's not act like this was a clean break. This was a slow-motion car crash that ended with one final, fiery explosion. And now, with Clark rising and Griner disappearing, the WNBA's made its message clear: out with the drama, and with the stars. So now the question is, was this really about Griner's retirement? Or was it about the league hitting the reset button on a legacy they no longer wanted? Because when a star's fall is this loud, the silence afterward says everything. Griner, at one point, was the WNBA. The name, the highlight reel, the controversy magnet, the draw. From her towering presence on the court to her role in conversations about gender, identity, and global politics, there was no escaping her shadow. She dunked, she dominated, and she disrupted. But time is a way of humbling even the biggest stars. And in Griner's case, the fall wasn't slow. It was sudden, loud, and permanent. Her decline wasn't just physical, it was visible. She wasn't moving like she used to. The pace of the game was faster. The league's perimeter-based evolution was cutting her style out of the picture. Meanwhile, younger players were eating up the spotlight and the minutes. Then came Caitlin Clark. Clark didn't just enter the league, she redefined it. The attention she brought was immediate and relentless. Her following, built in college, carried straight into the WNBA. Her games were broadcast events. Her jersey sales spiked. And her brand? Practically minted from day one. For veterans like Griner, this wasn't just a new player. It was a changing of the guard. And that change brought tension. Griner's relevance was already slipping when the breaking point came. During a nationally televised game, she was caught on tape mid-game hurling racial slurs at Clark. There was no ambiguity. No misunderstood quote. It was clear, it was sharp, and it was immediately condemned. Fans were stunned. The incident didn't just stir outrage. It tore into Griner's carefully built image. Overnight, she went from trailblazer to pariah. And the worst part? That wasn't the end of it. Because the altercation didn't stop at words. During the same game, Griner got physical with Clark. It was aggressive. It was unnecessary. And it was caught in crystal clear HD. The video hit social media and exploded. Sports media ran the footage on repeat. Commentators weighed in. and even supporters of Griner were left speechless. This wasn't just another bad look. It was a full-on meltdown. The WNBA was silent at first, issuing the usual soft PR language about internal reviews and conduct standards, but the league didn't need to speak for the message to be understood. Griner was done. She was benched in the following games. Not rotated out. Not rested. Benched. The apology came shortly after. A statement released through official channels, regretful in tone, careful in language. She acknowledged Clark, apologized for her words, and said she needed time for reflection. It read more like a legal requirement than a heartfelt apology. By then, Clark had already moved on. She said nothing publicly. She didn't clap back. She didn't need to. Her silence only amplified the contrast between the two. One was imploding under pressure. The other was rising, unbothered. And the league? It had already shifted its attention. Caitlin Clark was the new face of the WNBA. Angel Reese wasn't far behind. These weren't just rookies, they were marketing gold. They brought in new viewers, fresh energy, and zero controversy. They were exactly what the league needed, and exactly what Griner couldn't be anymore. When Griner announced her retirement, there was no farewell press conference, no tears, no send-off from the league, just a one-paragraph announcement that felt more like a resignation than a retirement. The timing wasn't lost on anyone. After the backlash, the benching, and the PR damage, the retirement looked less like a planned career move and more like a forced exit. And the public saw it for what it was. Fans called it out. Commentators dissected it. And the narrative settled in. Griner wasn't stepping down. She was getting out before it got worse. Her Twitch streaming debut followed. An awkward attempt at rebranding. Soft gameplay, casual talk, and a clear shift from athlete to content creator. But no one really bought it. The shift felt like damage control. Less about building something new, more about hiding from the fallout. And while she streamed, Clark played. Reese competed. The WNBA kept growing without Griner. This wasn't just a career ending. It was a legacy redefined. Griner had the kind of resume that should have made her retirement a celebration. Instead, her name is now attached to conflict, bitterness, and a single moment that undid years of impact. And that's the hard truth. In sports, legacy is fragile. One moment can change everything. One incident can rewrite the story. And in Griner's case, that moment was a combination of resentment, aggression, and a refusal to accept change. The league didn't kick her out. They didn't have to. They just moved on. The spotlight turned. The fans followed. The narrative shifted. And Griner, once at the center of it all, was left on the sidelines permanently. And now, her story isn't one of a legendary exit. It's a warning. A warning to aging stars who can't let go. A warning about the power of social media to dismantle reputations. A warning about how fast public favor can turn when the next big thing walks through the door. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just walk in. She took over. She absorbed the attention, the ad dollars, and the energy of the league. And she did it without saying a word about the controversy. She didn't have to fight back. She won by standing still. Meanwhile, Griner spiraled. And when she walked away, no one begged her stay. The league is now entering a new era. The faces are younger, the pace is faster, and the marketing is sharper. The focus is on players who can compete and keep clean reputations. Players who bring value on and off the court, without dragging the league through headlines. Clark fits that mold. Reese fits that mold. Griner doesn't. That's why her retirement felt like a conclusion, but also a message. This is what happens when you don't evolve. This is what happens when your ego overshadows your game. This is what happens when the league outgrows you, and you don't see it coming. Griner's name will still be in the record books. Her highlights will still live on YouTube, but her exit will always carry an asterisk. Not because she aged out, but because she lashed out. Because when the spotlight dimmed, she didn't bow out with grace. She burned it all down. So what do you think? Was this a natural end for a player past her prime, or a legacy ruined by personal choices? Should the league have done more to mediate, or was Griner's exit inevitable? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe. Because in the world of sports drama, There's always another headline, another downfall, another legacy on the edge. We break it down. You keep the receipts. Brittney Griner, once the face of the movement, a towering figure both literally and metaphorically, is now the name people whisper when they talk about what not to do on your way out. It's a wild contrast, because not long ago, she was at the center of it all. Whether it was her dominance in the paint, her advocacy off the court, or her sheer presence as one of the few WNBA players casual fans could name without Googling, Griner was it. But in the span of a single season, the narrative flipped. And it didn't flip slowly. It flipped like a switch. You go from being the centerpiece of every promo package to barely being in the post-game interviews. You go from representing the league internationally to trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. That's how fast the game turns on you when controversy hits and the next generation is already warming up on the sidelines. Let's talk about how deep that shift really went. Before the incident with Clark, Griner had already been showing signs of decline. Slower on defense, less impactful in big games. The younger, faster players were running circles around her, and the league's focus on three-point shooting and speed wasn't doing her any favors. She wasn't washed, but she wasn't dominant either. Now, add Caitlin Clark to that picture. Clark didn't just join the league, she disrupted it. Her arrival was like a software update the league didn't even know it needed. Suddenly, everything was new. New eyes on the product. New fans filling arenas. New brands sponsoring the league. And most importantly, new standards for what it meant to be marketable. This is where the tension really started to build. Because Clark wasn't just good, she was beloved. And the WNBA, which had always struggled with mainstream appeal, saw her as the golden ticket. That meant players like Griner, who were used to being the ones the league leaned on, were now being asked to make room. And let's be honest, Griner didn't like that. The resentment wasn't subtle. People noticed it in her body language during games. In pressers where she made passive-aggressive comments about rookies getting special treatment. In those moments where the subtext was loud enough to feel like yelling. But nothing could have prepared fans or the league for what came next. The mic'd up moment, the slur, and the shove. That incident was the death knell. The league didn't suspend her. They didn't fine her. They didn't even publicly rebuke her. But what they did do was even louder. They distanced. Hard. Suddenly, her name wasn't in highlight packages. Her face wasn't in social campaigns. Her jersey wasn't being promoted. The message was clear. This is not the story the league wants to tell anymore. And that's when Griner pulled the plug. The retirement felt abrupt, but the writing had been on the wall. When your role shrinks, your support vanishes, and the league is already polishing the crown for someone else. You don't get a farewell tour. You get a quiet exit. Now, let's talk about the apology. Because here's the thing. A public apology isn't just about saying sorry. It's about timing. Griner's apology came late. Not after the game. Not even the next day. It came after the backlash reached critical mass. After fans had already turned. After Clark had already responded with silence and another 30-point game. And the tone? It wasn't fiery. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even particularly personal. It was corporate, controlled, carefully worded. There was no press conference, no face-to-face interview. Just a typed statement, probably vetted by at least 3 different people before it was released. And that's exactly why it didn't land. Because by then, the public wasn't looking for a PR-safe apology. They were looking for accountability, for reflection, for something real. But what they got was a footnote in an already collapsing career. Meanwhile, Clark kept her head down, stayed in her lane, and kept playing. She didn't make it about revenge. She didn't speak on the drama. She let her game, and the league, do the talking. And the league was loud. Clark's face was everywhere. She was the story. She is the story. And the irony is brutal, because while Griner was publicly melting down, Clark didn't even have to lift a finger. She just kept rising. The WNBA's pivot to Clark and other rising stars like Angel Reese wasn't subtle. It was strategic. This wasn't just about talent. It was about optics. Clark was clean, polished, and marketable. Griner, post-meltdown, was none of those things. And the league knows what sells. Griner's Twitch pivot felt like a desperate rebrand. One minute you're throwing elbows on the court, and the next you're streaming Fortnite and pretending like none of it happened. The audience wasn't buying it. It wasn't a vibe. It was damage control with a headset. And as the league pushed forward, Griner's story faded into the background. No farewell game. No player tributes. No jersey send-off. Just silence. She was effectively scrubbed from the spotlight she once dominated. And the craziest part? The league didn't even need to try that hard to erase her. She did it to herself. The meltdown, the slur, the altercation, the late apology. Each one chipped away at the respect she'd spent years building. And now, instead of being remembered as a generational talent, she's remembered for how it ended. Messy, bitter, alone. There's a lesson buried in all this. A brutal one. If you don't evolve, the game will leave you behind. If you don't know how to lose the spotlight gracefully, it will be ripped from you. And if you let ego drive your decisions in a league that's already moving on, you're setting yourself up for irrelevance. Griner could have leaned into mentorship. She could have been the bridge between the old WNBA and the new. She could have left on her own terms. But she chose ego over evolution. Now she's out. And Caitlin Clark? She's not just in, she's thriving. She's the new standard, the new face, the walking headline who hasn't even peaked yet. Clark didn't take Griner's place. She built a new one, while Griner was too busy looking back. So what happens now? Griner will likely disappear from the mainstream for a while. She might try to re-enter the conversation through interviews or side projects, maybe even a book deal. But the league? It's not waiting. It's already deep in a new era, where names like Clark, Reese, and Buchers are what fans want. Where legacy isn't enough. Where past dominance can't protect you from present-day mistakes. And most of all, where relevance is earned daily. This wasn't just about Brittney Griner versus Caitlin Clark. This was about era versus era. Identity versus evolution. Power versus popularity. And in that battle, popularity won. Because even with all the talent, accolades, and history that Griner brought to the table, none of it could survive the public blowback of a racial slur caught on camera in a league that's actively trying to shed its reputation for internal conflict. You can't fight the future, not when it's being televised. Let's rewind, just briefly, to how we even got here. Because for years, Griner stood as a symbol of strength and resistance. She wasn't just dominant, she was defiant. She played with edge, talked with pride, and wasn't afraid to stir the pot. That worked for a while. But the WNBA of today isn't the same scrappy underdog it was when Griner came up. It's not just looking for elite athletes anymore. It's looking for faces. For stars that can sell. For players who can post a highlight on TikTok, shake hands with sponsors, and still clock in 30 points a night. Clark and Reese were tailor-made for that world. Griner? She represented the old guard. Tough, gritty, unfiltered. And when that style met a media landscape fueled by outrage, receipts, and replay buttons, it cracked. The league didn't need to cancel her. Social media did that before the front office even got their morning coffee. Because once that video clip of Griner shouting slurs at Clark hit the internet, the debate wasn't about sports anymore. It was about standards. And the WNBA had to make a choice. Support a declining veteran, already fading in impact, tied now to a scandal that touched every cultural nerve, or pivot hard into the players fans were actually tuning in to see. They made that decision fast. You saw it in the promos. You saw it in the coverage. You saw it in the silence. Clark became the centerpiece, and Griner became the headline they didn't want to touch. Let's not pretend this was some clean break, either. This wasn't a mutual decision or a personal choice to step away. The league didn't just suddenly start favoring younger players. Griner handed them every reason to do so. The racial slur, the shove, the total loss of composure during a nationally broadcasted game. These weren't just bad looks. They were disqualifying, especially for a league finally entering the mainstream spotlight. Griner didn't just lose her spot. She gave it away. And while some fans tried to defend her, pointing to her history, her off-court challenges, her contributions to the game, the reality is simple. Legacies don't protect you from accountability. Not anymore. Not when the league is in the middle of a rebrand. Not when there are younger, cleaner, and more camera-friendly faces waiting in the wings. So when Griner released that apology, buried in a press statement with no voice, no face, no follow-up. It didn't land. It wasn't healing. It wasn't closure. It was a whisper, drowned out by the roar of the next game. And Clark? She didn't even acknowledge it publicly. No reaction, no interview, no comment. She didn't have to. The league, the fans, and the media were already on her side. She played through it. And every point she scored, every headline she earned, every viral highlight she dropped, it widened the gap. Not just in narrative, but in legacy. Because now, Brittney Griner's story ends not with applause, not with pride, but with a warning. This is what happens when a game changes, and you don't. When you try to hold on to the spotlight by force instead of evolving with grace. When your name becomes synonymous with controversy, not competition. And when the league that once celebrated you decides it's easier to move forward than to look back. Let's call it what it was, a fall from grace in real time. And let's be clear, this wasn't about one moment. It was a culmination. Years of tension, resistance, frustration, and ego, all erupting in one meltdown that rewrote everything. It's not just that she said what she said. It's when she said it, how she said it, and who she said it to. Caitlin Clark wasn't just another rookie. She was the future. And in attacking her, Griner wasn't just targeting a player. She was attacking the league's direction. That's what made it unforgivable. Not just the words, but the message behind them. I don't want to move over. But the game didn't wait. It never does. And now, Griner's gone. Quietly. Quickly. Streaming on Twitch like the last season never happened. Offering up soft banter while the WNBA rolls out its next wave of stars. And fans? They're watching Clark. Watching Reese. Watching the future unfold. Griner's legacy is still in the books, sure. But it's no longer leading the conversation. It's a footnote. A warning label. Because the WNBA isn't just evolving, it's rebranding. And it's doing so in real time, with Griner's exit as the clearest signal yet. The old model of dominance and defiance doesn't work anymore. What works now? Poise, precision, presence. Clark has it. Reese has it. The new generation gets it. They're not just playing the game. They're playing the media, the narrative, the moment. And Griner? She never adapted to that world. She never wanted to. She was built for a league that needed noise to be heard. But now, the league has volume. It has visibility. And it no longer needs controversy to get it. So her departure isn't just a personal story. It's part of the league's transformation. One generation fading, not from lack of talent, but from an inability to evolve with the culture it helped create. The story of Brittney Griner's retirement is more than a scandal. It's a statement. Change with the game, or become the example. So what do you think? Did Griner self-sabotage? Or was she forced out by a league eager to bury its old guard? Is there a path to redemption? Or is the damage permanent? Sound off in the comments. We want to hear it. And hit that subscribe button for more breakdowns of the biggest drama, downfalls, and turning points in pop culture and sports. We're here for the chaos, and we don't miss a meltdown. Because in this era, headlines fade, but legacies echo.